Good morning, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Classic Album War. Today we're going to look at two pretty legendary albums from two British bands, one released in 1970, one released in 1971. Before we get started, though, I do want to wish a very happy birthday to a very long time and loyal viewer, Mr. Rick Annabelle. Rick, happy birthday. Hope you have a great one. Thanks for watching. I hope you keep on watching and love what you see on Sea of Tranquility going forward. Have a great one, my friend. All right, let's get back to the albums here. All right, so the first one, the first contestant to our battle, our fight today is Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs from Derek and the Dominos, the debut and only album released by this band, studio album anyway. That's going up against the fifth release from Traffic, The Little Spark of High Heel Boys, okay? Ironically, both albums, not mega hits back in the day when they were released. They've both since been certified Platinum Plus, 1 million units plus here in the U.S. But, ironically, considering that both had, a fair share of hit singles, neither one was mega selling out, which kind of surprised me when I looked that up. But let's take a look at one and then the other. All right, we're going to go with the one from 1970. So Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs by Derek and the Dominos. Of course, Derek and the Dominos, comprised of Eric Clapton, Bobby Whitlock, Duane Allman, Jim Gordon, and Carl Rattle. Pretty much a supergroup. Eric Clapton and the band, Delaney and Bonnie's band, and then you got Duane Allman from the Allman Brothers, right, contributing in the studio. Some pretty fiery guitar playing on this. Arguably, Clapton's last great full-on guitar album, although, some of his solo albums had plenty of good guitar work, but, this comes on the heels of Cream and Blind Faith. A lot of great guitar playing from Eric on here, but probably with a kick in the butt from having Duane next to him, right? I think he's gone on record saying many times that Duane was one of the finest guitar players he's ever played with and really gave him a shot in the arm that he needed, other than the other stuff that he was putting in his arm at the time. Because, of course, the story behind this album and behind a lot of the lyrics is that, Eric was deeply in love with one of his best girlfriends at the time. Okay, so of course we're talking about George Harrison and his girlfriend Pattie Boyd. Eric was like head over heels in love with her, but because of the situation, obviously he's in love with his best friend's girl, and she kind of, at the time, spurned his advances. He got really depressed and upset about this and sunk himself into alcohol and heroin addiction. Obviously, as the story would unfold later on, she wound up leaving George for Eric. But he was so messed up at the time, it continued his descent into drug and alcohol abuse that eventually he married her, but eventually that relationship did not work out either, right? So, go figure. But anyway, back to the album. A double album when it was released. A very strong album. A beloved album by many. My opinion is that I think this would have been a better single album. I think there's a couple filler tracks on here, but I dig most of this album quite a bit, and I think there's just some spectacular guitar interplay from Eric and Duane. You got I Looked Away, great, and most of this album is just a real bluesy album. A lot of great guitar solos. I Looked Away. Bell Bottom Blues was one of the hit singles on the album. It's an FM rock mainstay. Very cool blues tune. Keep On Growing, I like quite a bit. A lot of fiery solos on that. Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out. Again, the song titles and a lot of the lyrics just really explain the kind of the hurt that's going on within Clapton, right? He's just almost every song is just about, not getting that woman that you love, and you can't deal with it, and it's just taking up every day, going through your head, your heart's breaking, that sort of thing. I Am Yours, one of my few throwaway tracks on this album. Any Day is a great tune. Great rockin' tune. A lot of great guitar playing. Key to the Highway is like the big, long, sprawling jam. It's almost 10 minutes long. Again, Duane and Eric just making magic together. What do we got? Tell the Truth, another cool tune. Why Does Love Got to Be So Sad? Another kind of somewhat hit from the band. They play on the radio. I dig that song a lot. Might, next to the title track, might be my favorite tune. Have You Ever Loved a Woman? Okay, more bluesy, gutsy playing here. Little Wing, so their take on the Hendrix classic, done very well, I might say. You know, that's one of those tunes I did a couple months back. I did a show about some of the great cover tunes that are arguably as good, if not better, than the original. And I wouldn't say that their cover of Little Wing is better than Hendrix's, but it's done differently and it's fantastic. And I would say pretty on par there. And I know that's saying a lot, right? Because the Hendrix Little Wing obviously is super legendary, but these guys did a great job. Then you got It's Too Late. Then Layla, of course, which everybody knows very, very well. And then Thorn Tree in the Garden, little mellow piece to kind of end the album out. I would say, what do you got? 14 tracks on here? I would say, at least 10 or 11 of them pretty spectacular. The other couple, I'm like, I like them, but might have been, for me, a better kind of single album, but still, no matter what way you look at it, one of the landmark albums of the 1970s, okay, released right at the beginning of the year, 1970, and an album that's really kind of stood up to the test of time, right? And another testament to the greatness that was Duane Allman, who, of course, was not long for this planet short after this was done, unfortunately. But another, if you're going and amassing all the greatest stuff that Duane Allman ever contributed to the world of music, you got to throw this in there too. But again, like I mentioned earlier, for me, one of the last truly great albums as far as guitar playing goes. A guitar-fueled album for Clapton, because while he would have plenty of good playing on, especially his first solo album, but those couple of the first ones, kind of spotty as far as guitar hero status. In other words, like if you're someone who, what you want to hear from Clapton is the stuff like the Blues Breakers and Cream and Blind Faith, and this would probably be the last kind of real, guitar heavy album, I would say. But and just great vocals from Whitlock and Clapton on here. Just a really, really strong album. Really strong album. Legendary for a reason. All right, next up, from a year later, The Low Spark of High Heeled Boys. Of course, Traffic, this is their fifth album. They have been, it's funny when you really stop and think about it, Traffic had been around since like the mid-'60s, putting out records and stuff. They were like the early purveyors of that kind of like British psychedelic and folk scene, right? And their music always kind of involved many different elements. Okay, so you had some rock, some psychedelia, what you might call the early prog scene, certainly some jazz, certainly some blues, a lot of folk, like I mentioned. So this album kind of put all that together yet again. It's amazing how many strong albums this band had, kicking off with the intoxicating, mesmerizing, majestic, kind of folky, jazzy rock tune, Hidden Treasure. Okay, just some, fantastic stuff going on here. And wonderful flute playing. Okay, so who do we have on the lineup for this album? Okay, we've got Steve Winwood, obviously, on vocals, Hammond organ, guitar, other keyboards. Jim Capaldi on lead vocals and percussion. Jim played drums on most of the early stuff, but then they brought in Jim Gordon on drums. Ironically, the same Jim Gordon who appeared on this album, right? And then on bass, you got Rick Gretsch, okay, also was in Family, and Chris Wood, longtime member on saxophone and flute, and then Rebop Kwaku Ba on additional percussion, okay? And title track comes up next, all 12 minutes and change of it, all right? A FM radio staple, the hit for the band. Just a fantastic tune. One of the great kind of classic rock songs of all time. Dun, 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 dun. It's got a great organ solo from Winwood. Killer vocals from him. The drums and the percussion, the bass. It's just this kind of moody, swirling, intoxicating song. Love it. It's one of those tunes that I could hear over and over and over again. Then you got Rock and Roll Stew, sung by Capaldi, a really good like hard rock tune. All right, another FM radio staple. Good hook in that tune. Always dug it. Then the lengthy Many a Mile to Freedom, which might be my kind of like unsung hero track on this album, along with another one. Another kind of like mixing, a tune that just mixes all sorts of different styles. It's got some pop hooks in it. It's a rock track, but it's got some prog, a little bit of jazz and blues, a little bit of everything rolled in. It flows really nicely. These guys were great at like kind of this kind of airy yet dense at the same time instrumentation. Then you got the kind of whimsical Light Up or Leave Me Alone. Okay, great guitar hook from Winwood on there. Very underrated player. I just love the kind of groove of that tune. It's kind of bluesy and rock at the same time. Dig it. And then Rainmaker, another 7+ minute track that's kind of haunting, kind of proggy, kind of like folky, atmospheric. And there's some cool rock elements that come in later in the track. Just a really, really fun tune that I always love. Again, another one of those like kind of trippy tunes that Traffic were always so good at. So, overall, a lot less material on this one compared to this. Obviously, a single versus a double album. But so what do I think when I compare them both? Well, they're two pretty different albums, obviously. I did this kind of for a reason today because they are so different. I've been wanting to put Traffic on this show for a while, put Low Spark of High Heeled Boys or really any of their albums. And I've been, kind of tossing around, well, what would be a good one to kind of go up against them? And I wanted to pick another British band, and I wanted to pick another album from kind of the same era, but also, I wanted to pick another album that had some very notable songs, some radio tunes and perennial favorites, but another album that, shockingly was not a tremendous seller back in the day. Both of these albums, like I said, surprisingly, not as big sellers as you would expect, considering the songs that are on there, right? But again, we're talking about the early 70s. I think as the 70s wore on, you started to see more and more albums go 5 million, 10 million, that sort of thing. So while, a million plus is nothing to sneeze at, I'm surprised that it was not more. Okay, but both albums have produced some legendary classic rock radio staples since their release. So again, I dig both of them a lot. Okay, I probably in my life, though, when it all is said and done, have been a little more fond of this one. I don't know, there's something, I find this album, like I said earlier, top to bottom, really engaging, really enjoyable. And while I love the hell out of this album too, like I said, there are a couple tracks on here that I'm like, yeah, I might skip that one. The stuff that's on here is fantastic. And, for me, the guitar player in me, if we were going to go by which is the best guitar-centric album, which one would I rather listen to if I really want to hear some great guitar work? Obviously, it's this one. But there's just something pretty magical about this album that I always like. So today I'm going to give this, it's going to squeak by. I'm going to give it a unanimous decision, but man, it's close. 116, 114, 115, 114, 115, 112. A very close battle, all right? And, while like I said, the guitar player in me was like, oh, God, you really doing this? I'm going to do it, okay? Like I said, there's no right or wrong answer. This is not a slight on the Layla album because I totally love it. There's going to be people who are going to be like, oh, no, there's no way that Layla loses to any other album. It's one of the greatest albums of all time. And I get that, okay? Definitely is one of them. I just like this one a little bit better. Just a little bit, okay? So it's not a big deal. There's no, like I said, no right or wrong answer. It's all about our preferences and what we like, what we don't like. So I love them both. So you really can't go wrong. But again, the idea behind this Classic Album War show is not to get into big debates about which album is better, okay? It's more of an excuse to talk about two great albums and hopefully get, for some of you who have never heard either of them, I'd be surprised if there were, to go out and listen to them. But yet I say that every time. But yet there are numerous shows where I get people like, oh my God, I've never heard that one of those albums, or I've never heard both of those albums. I'm going to go on YouTube and listen to them now. That's kind of the point, right? And if you are someone who's pretty familiar, maybe you haven't heard one or the other or both in a while, might be time to put them on, right? Listen to them once again and revel in their greatness and enjoy all the little nuances of the music. So two fantastic albums from the very early 70s. Curious to see what you guys think, which one you prefer and why. All right, or if you just want to kind of talk a little bit about why you love both of them, because again, there's no losers here, right? It's still just a way to get discussion going. So that's it, guys, for today. Anyway, visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, of course, we're here on YouTube every day. We will see you tomorrow morning with another Classic Album War. What do we got coming up this weekend? Hope to get to another questions and answers show. I'm probably going to try and squeeze a top 10 song show in this weekend. I don't quite know what it's going to be yet. And I am going to be in the process, hopefully, of putting together that Southern Rock History of show. Not sure when I'm going to record it. Hopefully sometime over the next week or so, if not sooner. We'll see how quickly that all comes together, because I'm looking forward to that, because, man, the summer's waning down. Got to get the Southern Rock History of show, or the History of Southern Rock show, out before the summer's over, right? Right? Because summertime is Southern Rock time. So the quicker I get this show out, the quicker you guys can be like, get all fired up and go out and listen to your Allmans and Lynyrd Skynyrd and 38 Special and the Outlaws and Molly Hatchet and Blackfoot and, Doc Holliday and, Rosalind Collins Band and Blackstone Cherry and all those, there's so many great Southern Rock bands. So Atlanta Rhythm Section, the Marshall Tucker Band, Wet Willie, all the usual suspects. I'm going to talk about all of them, so you don't want to miss that. Coming up as soon as I can get to it. But we'll see you tomorrow, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.